When we hear about a sudden strike, a covert operation, or a bold military move, it's easy to jump to conclusions based on headlines or political rhetoric. But beneath the surface lies a complex web of motivations, fears, and calculated decisions. Israel's recent attack on Iran is no exception. This is not just an impulsive act of aggression or retaliation. It's a carefully orchestrated move shaped by years of tension, strategic calculations, and deep-rooted concerns about survival. To truly understand why Israel took this dramatic step, we have to look beyond the obvious and explore the underlying reasons. Reasons that reveal the high-stakes game being played in the shadows of the Middle East. It's a story of power, security, intelligence, and the delicate balance that keeps a region on edge. What you're about to hear is the real reason Israel attacked Iran. Exposed without filters, so you can grasp the full picture behind the headlines. You see, when it comes to understanding why Israel chose to strike Iran, the first thing we have to grasp is the weight of perception, the perception of threat. It's not just about missiles or weapons systems. It's about a fundamental question of survival. When a nation feels its existence is on the line, it's driven by something deeper than strategy or politics. It's driven by fear, urgency, and the instinct to protect what matters most. Israel, a nation forged in the fires of conflict and adversity, carries the memories of history like a constant shadow. Those memories shape the way it sees the world today, especially when it looks at Iran. Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology, its growing influence in the Middle East, and its open hostility toward Israel are not abstract issues. They're existential threats. When you live in a region where history has taught you that the worst can happen, the line between precaution and survival becomes razor thin. This perception of threat is psychological as much as it is political. It's about the collective mindset of a people who have faced annihilation and refuse to face it again. When Iran talks openly about wiping Israel off the map, when it funds proxy groups intent on attacking Israel's soil, the fear is not just rational, it's visceral. It's the kind of fear that drives decisions that, to outsiders, may seem drastic or aggressive, but to those inside are necessary for survival. Now, you have to understand that in the game of nations, especially in volatile regions, perception often becomes reality. If Israel believes Iran is on the verge of developing nuclear weapons capable of threatening its existence, then Israel must act before that threat becomes irreversible. This is not about waiting for diplomacy to work or hoping that threats won't materialize. It's about confronting a reality where delay could mean disaster. Philosophically, this ties into a profound principle of self-preservation. The idea that survival sometimes demands hard choices. It's the same principle that guides any living being faced with a predator. The choice is simple: prepare and defend, or risk extinction. Israel's strike is rooted in that primal logic, elevated to the level of statecraft. But it's also about deterrence. By acting decisively, Israel sends a clear message, not just to Iran, but to the entire region and the world, that it will not tolerate threats to its existence. It's a psychological stance as much as a military one. It says, we see you, we will act, and if you cross the line, there will be consequences. That message shapes the calculations of allies and adversaries alike. And it's a key part of Israel's strategy to maintain security in a turbulent environment. This perception of threat is not static. It evolves with every missile test, every hostile statement, every clandestine operation. Israel watches, assesses, and acts based on the information it has. And sometimes that means striking first, because the cost of waiting could be too high. It's a burden that weighs heavily because with each decision comes the risk of escalation. But when survival is at stake, hesitation is a luxury few can afford. So when we talk about the real reason Israel attacked Iran, it's impossible to separate the action from this deep-seated perception of threat. It's a lens through which every move is made, every decision calculated. It's the understanding that in this arena, the stakes are nothing less than life and death. And here's the takeaway. When a nation acts out of this kind of existential urgency, it challenges us to think beyond politics and ideology. It invites us to see the human side of geopolitics, the fears, hopes, and harsh realities that drive nations to act in ways that reshape history. So as you reflect on this, ask yourself, How would you act if the survival of everything you held dear depended on it? The real reason Israel struck Iran isn't just a headline. It's a story about the profound instinct to survive, the weight of history, and the urgency of now. Understanding the perception of threat is the first step to understanding the actions it drives. And in that understanding lies the power to engage, to empathize, and maybe even to find paths toward peace. When we talk about Israel's attack on Iran, it's crucial to understand that this was not just a random strike thrown out of desperation or aggression. No, it was a calculated move aimed at undermining Iran's military capabilities, specifically targeting their nuclear facilities and missile development programs. And there's a deep strategic reasoning behind this. To grasp it fully, you have to look at the stakes involved and the long-term implications of what's at play.
Iran's military advancements, especially in nuclear technology, are more than just lines on a map or components in a lab. They represent a potential shift in the balance of power, not only in the Middle East, but on a global scale. When a country moves closer to possessing nuclear weapons, the entire dynamic of deterrence, diplomacy, and security shifts. For Israel, a nation already navigating a precarious existence, the thought of an adversary so close, gaining such destructive power is unacceptable. It's like watching a fire grow steadily nearer to your home and knowing that if you don't act now, the damage could be irreversible. This isn't about just stopping Iran from building bombs. It's about disrupting the very infrastructure that enables them to pursue those capabilities. By targeting nuclear sites, missile factories, and research centers, Israel is striking at the heart of Iran's military potential. This sends a message loud and clear: progress toward nuclear armament will be met with force. It's a way to slow down, to buy time, to force Iran back on its heels. But the implications go beyond just delaying programs. It's about shifting the calculus in Iran's leadership. When their critical assets are vulnerable, it creates uncertainty and forces reconsideration. It's a psychological blow as much as a physical one. It tells Iran that their ambitions come with costs, that they cannot pursue these paths unchecked or without consequence. This kind of pressure is designed to make them think twice about escalating their capabilities further. Think of it like a game of chess. Every piece you take from your opponent changes the options they have, limits their future moves, and influences the overall strategy. Israel's strikes are tactical moves within a broader game, designed not just for immediate impact, but for long-term influence. They're carving out space where diplomacy might have a chance, where the threat of unchecked nuclear growth is mitigated by visible consequences. At the same time, this approach reflects a deeply pragmatic understanding of modern warfare. Israel recognizes that in today's world, wars are not always fought with full-scale invasions or endless battles. Much of it is covert, precise, and targeted. Striking military capabilities before they fully materialize is a strategy rooted in intelligence and surgical action. It minimizes wider conflict but maximizes disruption. This approach also reveals the psychological depth behind military strategy. There's an understanding that weakening the enemy's capacity to harm you isn't just about physical destruction, it's about eroding their will and confidence. When you disrupt someone's critical infrastructure, you undermine their sense of invulnerability. You show them their plans can be challenged and destroyed. That's a powerful message. Philosophically, this raises profound questions about power and security. When does the pursuit of power cross the line into a threat that demands preemptive action? When does defense become offense? And how do nations balance the need to protect themselves with the risk of sparking wider conflict? These are not easy questions, and they don't have simple answers. But what we see in Israel's strike is a decision made under the pressure of these questions, choosing to act decisively rather than wait and risk losing control. It's also important to note that this strategy carries risks. Striking Iran's military capabilities risks retaliation, escalation, and further instability. Israel understands this, and that's why the decision to attack is never taken lightly. But the calculation is clear. The risk of inaction, allowing Iran to strengthen its military unchecked, is greater than the risk of action. That's the harsh reality of living in a region where power is constantly contested. So, as you reflect on this, think about the importance of timing and precision in conflict. Think about how sometimes the most powerful moves are not the loudest or the most visible, but the calculated strikes that change the game quietly but decisively. In the end, Israel's strike on Iran's military infrastructure isn't just about bombs or missiles. It's about preserving a fragile balance, asserting a boundary that cannot be crossed, and defending a nation's right to exist in a world full of uncertainties. True strength often lies in knowing when to act swiftly and strategically to disrupt the threats before they become unstoppable. It's in this balance of power and prudence that survival is forged. Now, let's talk about the geopolitical power play, the larger chessboard on which this conflict is unfolding. When Israel struck Iran, it wasn't just targeting military hardware or nuclear sites. No, this action was a calculated move in a much broader game of influence and dominance. It was a message, a clear, unmistakable signal to the world that Israel is not only capable of defending itself, but is willing to assert its position aggressively in a region that has long been defined by instability and shifting alliances. Understanding this requires us to think beyond just the immediate conflict between two nations. The Middle East is a complex tapestry woven with threads of history, religion, politics, and power struggles. It's a region where every move echoes far beyond its borders, touching global interests and alliances. When Israel acts, it's aware that it's not just addressing Iran, it's also shaping perceptions among neighboring states, regional powers, and even global super. This strike tells those watching, from the Gulf states to the great powers like the US, Russia, and China, that Israel remains a force to be reckoned with. It's a declaration of intent. Israel will not tolerate challenges to its security or its influence. This kind of assertion plays a dual role. On one hand, it deters adversaries by demonstrating resolve and capability. On the other, it reassures allies who depend on Israel as a strategic partner in a volatile region. But there's more beneath the surface. This power play is also about shaping the future balance in the Middle East. Iran's ambitions threaten to tip the scales in its favor, expanding its influence through proxy groups, forging alliances, and pushing ideological agendas that challenge the status quo. Israel's strike interrupts that trajectory. It says, "We reject your vision for the region. We will contest your influence at every turn." This dynamic echoes a timeless truth about power. It's not just about physical might, but about perception and psychological dominance. When a nation takes decisive action, it shapes narratives and expectations. It influences how allies and adversaries alike perceive strength and vulnerability. Israel's move reinforces the idea that power requires not only capacity, but the willingness to use it. Philosophically, this touches on the nature of sovereignty and self-determination. Every nation, like every individual, seeks to define its own path, to claim its place in the world. When external forces threaten that path, resistance becomes necessary, not just for survival, but for identity. Israel's actions reflect this drive to assert sovereignty in the face of encroachment. Yet, this power play is not without its complexities and dangers. Bold moves risk provoking escalation, miscalculation, and unintended consequences. It's a delicate dance, balancing strength with restraint, aggression with diplomacy. Israel must weigh its actions carefully, knowing that every strike shifts the geopolitical landscape and may prompt responses that ripple outward. This reality demands wisdom and strategic foresight. Power without prudence can lead to chaos. Strength without direction can become self-destructive. The true challenge lies in wielding power thoughtfully, using it to shape outcomes that preserve security and stability rather than inflame conflict. So, when you think about Israel's strike through this lens, you see a nation not merely reacting, but actively shaping its future. It's about more than defense, it's about influence, positioning, and the assertion of a vision for the region. It's a reminder that in the arena of international relations, power is always in motion, constantly negotiated and contested. Mm. And here's the final insight to take away. In this game of power, those who act with clarity of purpose and awareness of consequence hold the advantage. Israel's strike is a lesson in the interplay of force and diplomacy, of the enduring quest for security amid uncertainty. As you reflect on this, consider how power, whether in nations, communities, or personal lives, demands both courage and wisdom. It calls us to stand firm, speak clearly, and act decisively while never losing sight of the broader impact of our choices. Remember this: true power is not just the ability to strike, but the vision to shape a future where strength serves peace and influence fosters stability. When we look deeper into the reasons behind Israel's strike on Iran, we must understand the critical role that international diplomacy and alliances play in this high stakes drama. It's not just about two nations clashing, it's about how Israel navigates a complex global web of relationships, partnerships, and strategic interests. This dimension adds layers of complexity that often go unnoticed, but are vital to grasping the full picture. Diplomacy at its core is about relationships, it's about influence, negotiation, and sometimes the quiet balance between cooperation and confrontation. Israel's decision to strike Iran did not happen in isolation. It was shaped by the realities of international alliances and the shifting currents of global politics. Israel depends heavily on its allies, particularly the United States, for political backing, intelligence sharing, and military support. These alliances provide Israel with a strategic cushion, but also require careful management to ensure actions don't fracture those relationships. The United States, for example, plays a pivotal role in the Middle East geopolitical landscape. When Israel takes a bold step, it's also sending signals to Washington and other international players. It's a reminder that Israel is willing to act decisively when its security is at stake, but it also underscores the importance of backing from powerful allies. Without this support, Israel's position would be far more precarious. Beyond just the US, Israel must consider the broader international community. Global powers like Russia, China, and the European Union have their interests in the region, often conflicting and competing. Israel's strike sends ripples through these circles, forcing them to reassess alliances, strategies, and policies. It's a delicate dance of power and diplomacy, where one move can shift balances and realign partnerships. At the same time, this situation highlights the limits of diplomacy when faced with existential threats. Diplomacy can open doors to dialogue, treaties, and peaceful resolutions, but it requires mutual trust and good faith. When one side perceives that its survival is under threat, the patience for negotiation wears thin. Israel's strike reflects this harsh reality. When the stakes are life and death, waiting for diplomacy to succeed can be a luxury too costly to afford. Philosophically, this speaks to a fundamental tension in human affairs, the tension between the ideal of peaceful coexistence and the realities of conflict. Diplomacy embodies our highest hopes for resolving differences without violence, yet history teaches us that peace is fragile, especially when power imbalances and deep-seated fears exist. Israel's actions remind us that security often demands a dual approach. Pursuing diplomacy while preparing for defense, this duality is not unique to nations. In our own lives, we face moments when dialogue and understanding must be paired with firm boundaries and decisive action. There is wisdom in knowing when to engage and when to protect oneself by standing firm. Israel's strike exemplifies this balance on a global scale. Moreover, the attack exposes how fragile alliances can be under pressure. Allies may support a cause, but when actions risk wider conflict or international backlash, that support can waver. Israel had to weigh these risks. How far could it push without losing crucial support? This calculus is a lesson in the importance of strategic communication and timing in both diplomacy and conflict. The broader implication here is that no nation operates in a vacuum. Every decision echoes through a network of relationships that shape outcomes far beyond the battlefield. This interconnectedness demands not only strategic acumen, but also emotional intelligence and an understanding of global dynamics. So, when reflecting on Israel's strike, consider the delicate interplay between power, diplomacy, and alliance. It's a reminder that strength alone is not enough. It must be wielded within a framework of relationships that sustain and amplify it. This is the art of modern statecraft, balancing force with finesse, action with alliance. As you think about this, reflect on your own networks, whether personal, professional, or communal. How do you navigate the tension between standing your ground and building bridges? How do you balance your needs with the expectations and support of those around you? Remember this: true security arises not just from strength or action, but from the wisdom to manage relationships with care, courage, and clarity. It's in this balance that resilience is born and peace finds its footing. As we draw all these threads together, it becomes clear that the story behind Israel's strike on Iran is not just a tale of conflict. It's a profound lesson in strategy, power, and the human condition. It teaches us that decisions made under pressure are never simple, but they shape not only nations, but the very fabric of our shared future. Israel's actions reveal the necessity of foresight, the courage to act decisively, and the wisdom to navigate a world where strength must be balanced with diplomacy. In every challenge, whether on the global stage or in our personal lives, there's a call to understand the deeper currents beneath the surface, to see beyond immediate fears and reactions, and to engage with clarity and purpose. We learn that true power is not just about force. It's about vision, restraint, and the ability to hold relationships and principles in tension. So as you reflect on this moment in history, ask yourself, how will you wield your own power? How will you balance strength with wisdom, action with thought, and resolve with openness? Because it is in those choices, made with intention and awareness, that we find the path forward. Remember this: the real reason behind any decisive action lies not just in the act itself, but in the character of those who choose to act and in the legacy they leave for the world to come.